Welcome everyone. Well, today we are going to develop the topic of um, the questioning, the criticism, the discussing of international organizations model. Okay, it's important to remember and to bear in mind that we are going to approach this topic from the the field of studies of international relations. So we are going to delve into the different challenges and different topics, international topics, and their scope. We are going to question the effectiveness, the genuine situation of today's international community and the global governance. So the point in that aspect clearly is to incorporate some critical theories, some critical approach, considering these topics. Okay. Of course, if you have any doubt, you can use the chat or you can raise your hand just in case. Okay. As an introduction, it is important to bear in mind concepts of international relations, such as integration processes. We need to remember the integration processes is the connection, the agreements, sometimes because different topics, sometimes because immigration aspects, sometimes related to economic matters, sometimes related to different scope or different areas. For example, we tend to classify them as regional or global international organizations, multilateral, intergovernmental, supranational. Considering all these formats, it's important to bear in mind that the integration processes are quite and very, very tightly related to the concept of creating an international relation. So considering policies, institutions, economies, legal systems, etc., are part of these processes. So clearly we have an idea of having different, like in America, the OAS, the European Union, the IGAD, the ASEAN. We have a lot of institutions, a lot of acronyms that we tend to forget a lot of times, but it's very important to bear in mind and to remember that when we are speaking about subjects, we have the international recognition, the personality from the international law are part of the what we tend to call the classical model, the classical format of international relations, which is the states or the nations or the countries, and on the other side, the common forums, the international organizations. So in that case, it's important, of course, that the states are the primary subjects, whereas the international organizations are not only an accumulation, a common forum of all those subjects, is also has his own personality, his own presence. And because of that, are entities with different purposes and functions that were the incorporation, the creation of these organizations, okay? Not just a common scenario, common forum, are more than that according to their objective goals, okay? Purposes. So it's the essential idea, and we can use it to exemplify the idea of global governance. So from the second half of the 20th century, and especially since the beginning of the 21st, we have seen an enormous expansion of and proliferation of integration processes. According to that, we have a lot of international organizations for different purposes: science, health, tourism, different areas, different international topics, relevant aspects in the international forums. So we have a lot of international organizations. Considering that, it's important to remember some characteristics, some features of the nowadays international community, because the conception of a multipolar, interdependent, interconnect, and of course globalized world leads countries to understand that they cannot generate all their external projection individually. So we have a sort of independent interdependency, and also we have the concept and the main aspect of what we call the connection, the coordination, and the cooperation between countries. Considering that the international organizations were essential to produce that cooperation. But of course, considering all the time that already happened, different situations, the reality, what we call the international politics, okay, the reality of the nowadays of the different conflict situations, tensions, we can assure that one thing is what they want, or what the norm stipulates, organize the dispositions, but at the other side, on the other hand, we can consider clearly the real situation. Okay, this sort of collision between reality or international law and international politics, global governance and foreign policies, the national policies from each country to be executed, to be organized, and to be a project to the world to foreign actors or stakeholders is essential, because this connection um, show the situation and the tension between this lack of effectiveness of global governance. And of course, from that is the criticism, the questioning of this state of the art of this topic. Considering that, we need to take part in, I mean, all the countries need to take part in the different forums and spaces, but at the same time, we tend to have that disconnection. Now we are going to cover some of these topics and review some of the very important international topics. Okay, it's important to bear in mind also the aspect of contrast. When I'm speaking about contrast, again, we have one thing in the agreements, one thing in the treaties, one purposes, one speech, okay, in the common areas, the international organizations spaces. But on the other hand, we have the situation of contradictory policies, national policies, focus on interest, focus on national development. So that's sort of contradiction tend to create distortion, tend to create tensions inside of the country, and of course among allies countries. Gravitation, it's very important to remember to have a general idea of the concept of gravitation. Gravitation is like that capacity of a planet to have different bodies, a moon, for example, a satellite. Well, we take that metaphoric idea in the international relations to speak about a country that has that much influence, that has different countries around interest, plans, projections, etc. So that's created the idea of multipolar. Okay, we have different poles, different centers of influence according different criterias. It could be according to economic sector, a war power or related to the belus power, which is the war power. According to finances, according to strategical areas. If you are part of the routes of commerce, the routes of international transport, clearly you are part of the geopolitics. So according to all of that, the global landscape, it's quite more complex. The dynamic, the challenging concept, the challenging situation is a key characteristic. Multipolar, multipolarity, multifactorial. We have a lot of aspects to bear in mind, to consider in our analysis. This class also is to start to incorporate, to start to have a contact with different topics, different concepts related exactly to dimensions, to different areas in the international relations analysis. So to understand the global, the worldwide event, such as a conflict, but also it could be the tension between two countries. It could be the new agreement of another countries, the free trade agreement between a region. All those aspects is not just direct analysis. It's not just how we tend to see in the press, like just counting and considering all the facts and that's it. No, we need to go deeper, okay? We need to incorporate systematic, technical, professional approach to have a more complex of the prism, a more complex capacity to analyze different international events. Considering that, it's very important that these relevant issues, relevant topic, contrasting these different topics are a sort of selection. Of course, we have a lot of more topics, but it's a selection of the role of the international organizations. International organizations are part of the world plan, okay, or the world cooperation and coordination among countries. So be able to contrast regulations or declarations with reality or international policy in factual terms. For example, conflicts, wars, tensions, territorial aspects, crisis, of course, economical or political or social crisis. All that ideas clearly leads us to the concept of intentions against interest. One thing tends to be the speech of a country promoting, let's see, for example, international environmental law, and at the same time, incorporating new factories and new methods of fracking or new, very dangerous to the environment mechanism to increase their profits or their national economy development. So both tensions we need to consider in that what we call the double agenda. One thing, one speech, one area, one promotion in the international environment, international forums, and another one in the foreign policy. This connection is very important to consider because shows the lack of effectiveness of, and clearly the critical approach that we are going to incorporate of the international organization model. Considering this, we can start with the international human rights system. This system is quite connected to some principle of the human rights. For example, the universality of them, the inalienability of them, the non-discrimination, and clearly encouraging the whole world, especially from the work of the international organizations, to have a more protective world over or of human beings, human beings in general, not about citizens, not about other classifications of individuals, human beings. If you are a human being, you are under protection of human rights. Considering that, clearly we have tons of agreement, tons of international policies, international law principles, and international law norms related to that. So international organizations clearly have a largely devoted work to the declaration, the promotion, the interagency work with human rights. Although, despite all this declaration, all this work, all this interinstitutional work, we have a special emphasis on the role of international solidarity. When we have some actors like NGOs and some what we call international solidarity, different actors that try to cover the different flaws, the different sort of holes, sort of gaps between what an international organization wants and what is actually able to do. Well, we have the first trigger, or the first red flag, let's call it that way, about, okay, we have a lack of something because the civil society is asking, is demanding some aspect, some coverage, some problem. And on the other side, we have the situation that the international organization is not able to cover all that perspectives, especially when it's the disconnection with the civil society. And the NGOs needs to cover, for example, the Mediterranean crisis with the refugees, or some situation in the south of in the south and the north of Mexico with the refugees and the migration. Also with other aspects like environmental situations and transborder contamination processes, the requirements of more international accountability. All those aspects needs to be bear in mind, especially considering the human rights. A lot of the countries around the world recognize the human rights. They are part of the discourse or the speech of accepting the human rights, promoting the human rights, guaranteeing the human rights. But at the same time, they programmatic policies, national policies, foreign policies are opposed to that. The governmental interest, the double agenda, created that disconnection. This does not deny the reality of constant violations, ethnical, racial problems, genocides, forced disappearances, political imprisonment, slavery. All are crimes against humanity. All are against human rights system. Constant violation, massive transgressions. That's kind of the reality versus what we have in the international law. So that disconnection again shows a criticism over the international organization model. Another topics that we can include to this list to have this review over some very important, very relevant international topics, and in contrast with the situation or the real, genuine situation of international organizations. For example, the prohibition of the use of force, okay, is related to the use of force as military force, as the invention, as war in general, conflicts, armed conflicts between one nation or more than one nation, between two nations or a group of nations around the world. Actually, this is a guiding principle of the international law, which is the prohibition of the use or even the threat of use of force, connected to the war law, which is the jus in bellum and jus ad bellum in Latin. And of course, it's an imperative law, which is a norm of jus cogens, which rightly prohibited the use of force. Of course, you can say, okay, Gonzalo, yes, thank you about the prohibition, but we have wars. we have conflicts, we have prosecutions, we have a lot of situations pursuing different ethnics areas, different population, discrimination. Yes, I know. So that's against the law and the reality, the political or the politics situation, the international politics and the international law. The disconnections shows the big problem of the essential intermediary, the essential guarantor of this, which was the international organizations model in general, and specifically some of international organizations as a global standard, as a main actor in the concept of a stakeholder of the of the global governance. So considering that, clearly some situation we have a pattern, despite the law, despite the principle of prohibition, which are interventions, ultimatums, threats, blockades, economical, political, and even conflicts or wars. At this very moment, Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Israel, North Korea, South Korea, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, a lot of situations, and the list go on. So it's just a selection, just to name just a few. So it's very important, the contrast again of these topics, very important topics that affect all of us, the whole world, and clearly our rights. Expansionist projections, another topic, and also the territorial tensions. The issue or the topic of cartography, maps, as a project rather than a geographical reality. Sometimes we think that maps are reality, are somebody with measuring the distance. That's not the truth. It's not related to geographical reality, to physical measures of a country or a region or some context. No, it's a project. Implies a lot of ideas, political aspects, social aspects, cultural aspects are included in any kind of cartography. So considering that, it's very important to consider in terms of safety and security in international terms, the whole projection of a nation, of a country, which clearly impacts on the elaboration of their foreign relations. If we have a country that has no problem, no territorial tensions, is quite fond of, quite related, keen on maintain the peace, to keep the same context. Whereas when we have an expansionist proposal that creates a situation of incorporating, invading other countries, clearly impact in the concept of the possibility of a coexistent, peaceful coexistence. So considering that the foreign relations are clearly in constant elaboration and impact by this concept of expansionist approaches, that would reconfigure entire regions or redefine the international community with respect to influence and representation. For example, Argentina with the Antarctica disputes, or the Falkland disputes, or Malvinas dispute, the Lacan Bharat in India, the tensions in some areas in the south of Mexico, the north of Mexico, and then south of Canada, with the new foreign policy of the USA. We have a lot of tensions. That kind of territorial disputes shares and prove the quite complex situation, and the common forums didn't help during their creation and development with setting and organizing these disputes in a very peaceful or very effective way to don't create more disturb, more complex situation and tensions. No escalate. And because of that, we have a lot of conflicts. World initiatives. This is another topic to put in contrast, to consider, to focus on, which is the main proposals, the main initiatives that tend to be promoted from the international organization, mainly the global ones, like the United Nations. Millennium Goals or Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development are such a good examples. The proposal of a better world, normally quite connected with international environmental law, with sustainable development, with human rights. All of that tend to be considered, but at the same time, we can consider the improvement, the real, the genuine aspect of this. Concrete expressions of the international community, more specifically the United Nations, to create a better world, to work on that. We mentioned already how was not possible to conjugate and consecrate what was stipulated in the Millennium Goals, and also similar situation has been happening with the 2030 agenda. So that decades of declarations, speech, proposal, projections of a world that is improving are added, but beyond the paper, this improvement is not happening. It's not consolidated. It does not stop having marches and counter marches. It's going and back. Because does not stop being directly affected by the clash of interest. Again, the gravitation, the foreign policy and the global governance as a collision, as a clash. Why we need to consider that? Well, clearly the double agenda, the geopolitics, the geostrategy are issues in the different regions of the world. And can we speak? Maybe we can question ourselves. And in general, can we speak of a world without hunger, without a world of poverty, without war, a world without inequality? Is kind of utopic. It's very hard to imagine, to figure it out, a world without poverty, without hunger, without inequality. And clearly, these sort of proposals are very hard to imagine to being consecrated. And according to that, it's almost inconceivable, unrealistic. Hence, one ends up asking, what is the function of this world initiative if they cannot be achieved? So against criticism over these world initiatives, world proposals, if they really cannot be real, even if we didn't be able to believe them or to conceive them, to imagine them. That's very hard, especially considering the different authorities, the different foreign policies that need to be coordinated with all this. Of course, we have the international justice, okay? International justice, jurisdictional bodies that guarantee justice and equity at the international or regional level. Don't know if we have. Okay. I don't know if we have any question or any comment. Remember, you can use the chat, okay? Just in case. Okay. If you have a doubt, of course, a lot. This is a very big topic. It's a huge, a lot of information. It's a first contact. Don't worry a lot. The idea is to question, to put in order some ideas. And of course, later you can go deeper, go to the bibliography and go on with the different topics that we are covering. International justice, following this previous issues, matters that I already mentioned tend to be connected with the concept, okay, we have an international law, we have some norms, some principles, human rights. Okay, we have effective jurisdictional bodies, effective intergovernmental, recognized entities that produce justice in an international or regional level. Well, how to ensure that what has been promised is fulfilled? How to dissuade governments or certain sectors from continuing to violate human rights? How to propose the realization of a more humanist world and make this the priority over the interest, against interest, against interest, against law, against rights, against um, the real or the speech situation, the what we tend to call the needs and the goals for a better world, better life quality, lifestyle, etc. That was consecrated, is disposed in different laws, but at the same time is ignored. So that's this connection, again, is a criticism over this international justice. A lot of these international entities or bodies are international organizations, okay, are part of the model, focus on jurisdictional, judicial bodies, but we need to bear in mind to consider that they are international organizations and part of the model, okay, tend to be connected with some other organizational format or system, like, for example, the Inter-American Human Rights Court, connected with the Human Rights Commission. Same with European area, the Americas continent, etc. Part of this lack of effectiveness, lack of real justice. Considering that, the answer would be to think of regional or global international justice, but we need to consider its frameworks are constrained by the characteristics of the paradigm of coordinations and pretensions between guaranteeing rights. So we have a law, we have the commitment and even the disposition that the states, the nations have to guarantee this principle, these rights, but at the same time, we have a policy, a foreign policy, some interests that are against that. So in the middle, we can clearly have the authority, the guarantor of international justice, but it's not exactly being able to do what they have to do. So considering that, these jurisdictional entities are usually framed within international organizations, and it is precisely their non-respect at the national level that has led to great questioning to problematize this. Therefore, they end up with conception of not being sufficient, not being functional to the present reality, and not constituting a real guarantee as a judicial instance, both at the regional level. For example, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in the Americas continent, connected with the OAS, the Organization of American States, and also the in the European area, the Strasbourg Court, which is the European Court of Human Rights. It's not a European Union institution, it's a whole European, a continental European institution. Or even in the international level, such as the International Criminal Court. In the previous one, we were speaking about, in previous slides, we were speaking about the situation of massive transgression and constant violations of human rights. as an example. So if the human rights courts were efficient, that could be even considered, okay? That couldn't happen, but it's happening. So we need to question, to to consider and clearly to debate the effectiveness of the international justice. Of course, sometimes we tend to say, okay, this is better than nothing. Yes, that's true. Of course, human rights, international human rights system, international environmental law, prohibition of force, tendency and promotion of peace, safety, promotion of a good quality lifestyle, of course, is better than not having that in a law or recognition or declaration, or even if we have as a fundamental right with different national constitutions. But at the same time, we are not being really able, and when I say we, I mean the international organizations are not actually fulfilling their commitment to guarantee those rights. So this disconnection clears insufficient judgments, lack of enforcement, distrust, dysfunctional in terms of time, lots of time, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to solve a situation, impossibility to effectively guarantee rights and to ensure that their judgments are complied by the nation states, the members or the different members of the region. We have that, a lot of very good judgments, but not being recognized or not being fulfilling by the states, by the nations. That's another distortion that we need to take into account and shows the criticism of the international justice as another topic in contrast over the genuine situation, over the effective, the real capacity of the international organization model. This is not about just criticism and that's it. No, the point is, okay, if this model is not working, how we can propose a new one. And for that, all of you, of course, are more than welcome to think, okay, to propose, okay, how we can change the model, how we can propose a better way to guarantee, to promote, to be sure that the rights will be fulfilled, the human rights, the situation over conflicts and wars, the effective mechanism over this, more than that we already know, which is the global governance or the international organizations model. Of course, we have another aspect that is essential in the terms of understanding the international community nowadays, which is the expansion of a scope and the stakeholders or the actors in the international relations. Clearly, the international relations at the 20th century or even in the 18th century are very different than nowadays. This situation is very, very different before the Second World War, after the Second World War, when we already created the United Nations, the Bretton Woods Pact, the declarations of San Francisco. So we have another world, another situation. The Cold War, very different context, the bipolar situation than nowadays with a multipolar situation. So nowadays we are in the situation, we are in an international community scenario that is more complex, interdependent, interconnect, globalized, multipolar, multifactorial, but there are also a clear characteristic, which is multi-actor or multi-stakeholders. It's just not only the states, The links between states is not just the definition of international relations. It's not only a state plus international organizations. No, we are having different actors. The appearance and repositioning of certain actors with an increasingly and prominent role in decision making, in projection and opinion on issues that are relevant to the international community is on the rise. So that's happening. We already have, I already mentioned the situation of international solidarity, the importance of NGOs and civil society organizations that are involved, are part of solving decision, opinion, demanding the different measures, the different acts, the different programs, according to activities, according to this situation, according to the real situation of, again, crisis, conflicts, tensions, international events. So we can highlight the role, but not only the international solidarity, also the private sector, the transnational and multinational companies. Some of them have so much money than a country, than a whole economy of a country. So it's very important to consider the financial, the international investments and some aspect of what we tend to call the international businesses that are part of these tendencies, definition and redefinition of the international community. Again, it's not only the states, it's not only the nations, we have more actors, more stakeholders. So considering that, the civil society, the recognition of civil society, is very important. In other times, we didn't have the participation of civil society or even the individual. If the individual wants to be part of the international relations, needs to be through the state, but not were able, not to be recognized. So positioning and reporting of pressing issues of international society is part of a new role. Even the individuals, for example, being able to demand the fulfilling of a human right in a personal context, in a specific case. So that's emphasis over private sector, civil society, individuals or just persons, less and less relegated, being validated to participate actively and even directly in the configuration and redimension of international relations shows, again, a very complex scenario. So the situation is another one. Maybe we already have a situation, we already have an era of international organizations, but nowadays they are showing not sufficient. And we need to think. That's part of the criticism, is also the proposal, more constructive, to, okay, we need to create something to be able to address the different challenges, international challenges or global challenges, the different situations that we need to consider and also to cover. According to all of that, we need to bear in mind some questions, some criticisms, some analysis that are transverse, okay, are connected to all the review of topic, the contrast topic that we already cover, international topics, okay, international thematic review that we already mentioned, and is part of that, of the international organization model. The main criticisms, of course, I was mentioning some of them, but it's important to consider that the growing questioning, not just questioning, a deepened process, questioning something is the problematization of the aspects, okay? We need to have more analytical approach over the international organization model. So their scope, their role, their effectiveness, their shortcomings, okay? Their flaws, are part of for a long time, the focus was placed on the fact that the problem came from the process of crystallization. Crystallization is the process that created law in an international scope, is able to migrate, is able to crystallize in a national law. Okay, so the international being influenced in the national constitution, national law, different hierarchy of law. So that's connection of international and national level from exactly the clash between state and governmental interest, and also the situation of the interest and the dynamic of each country, as each specific context, exactly in the disruptive, in the disconnection with the global governance. So we can refocus on the questioning, on the criticism, and wonder whether international organizations are operating effectively as intermediaries, as translators from the individual to the collective, the international, both connection, the macro to the micro and the micro to the macro. They are effectively creating that connection, creating that sort of translation. Clearly, we have doubts about that. The shapers of the global plan, well, the global plans, the world initiatives are in question, are not effective, are not happening, are not achievable. So we need to reconsider all of that. I'm going to ask you, for example, how there is a draining of their aims and objective in favor of conflict of interest and the unbalanced composition of their members. This is one of the first points, which is the lack of democracy and representation. Why? It's a tendency. It's not the same. The vote of just an example, if not, it's not the same vote of, despite the fact that in law, in real recognition, it should be, but it's not actually the same vote of Germany in the European Union than Czech Republic. It's not the same. Okay, it's not the same boat because the capacity, the influence, the gravitation of Germany over other countries, sort of flagship in that area. The same if I go to the United Nations, the same if I go to any kind of an international organization. It's a lack of democracy because all the votes are not equal. So the tendency is that they tend to lack equitable representation of all their members. There is an imbalance in decision making, and the process of decision making is clearly essential to leadership, essential to a bias. We notice influences, bias by countries that have greater gravitation, more money, more economic power, more diplomatic presence, more capacities in different sectors, capacity of production, more presence in global markets, etc. So all that, part of that, that way to consider what we call gravitation as a very complex and complete category, okay, in this study field, is very important to bear in mind that this lack of democracy is clearly an essential question, because the forums are based on coordination among peers, coordination and cooperation. If I have ones over the others, there's no coordination. The inefficiency and bureaucracy, such a problem, not only in international organizations, but clearly considering the importance and the proposal of international organization model, these are such a problems. Because diplomatic protocols, official channels, as well as bureaucratic structures, rather than serving as a guarantee or verification of high quality processes, end up acting as inhibitors, deterrents, and even obstacles to decision making and the implementation of policies and programs. This is very a barrier, and it cannot be completed, it cannot be overpassed, it cannot be ignored. It's such a problem nowadays. Even the inequity quite connected with a lack of representation. International politics in terms of geostrategy, geopolitics, as I was mentioning before, as well as the power struggles, the tensions, the collisions, the conflicts are transferred to the common spaces. So the international organizations are not just for the good things, the global governance, are also the field to metabolize, to connect, to instrumentalize. They are being instrumental to canalize, to connect, to be the channel of evolving or developing these kind of tensions, this kind of geostrategy and geopolitics, which is against its essence, against its nature. But that's what's happening. Okay, this cover of legality and legitimate and common forums ends up serving as a channel to implement pressures, interventions, to establish power of one country over the others. So it's been very instrumental to the model of gravitation, which is such a problem. Yes?
Personal address. Costro. Next
Sorry,
month, yeah. I'm back.
Can you start again? I think you have a little connection problem.
Hi.
Hi. Okay.
Hi,
I
Professor
think we have,
Gonzalo.
yes.
Did you complete the presentation?
Hmm?
Did you complete it? Or
Oh,
you have
yes, of
still a time?
course. Yes.
All right.
Okay, I have.
You have a time to present some more slides, or this is the last slide?
No, it's just extra slide and we are completed.
Okay, go
Okay?
ahead. It's very interesting.
Thank
you are
you.
amazing.
Thank
you are
you, Cameron.
amazing lecturer. I'm proud of you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Our
I know it's a
professor.
lot, so don't run.
Yes. Oh, amazing.
Don't run away.
Super.
Thank you. Okay. The lack of implementation and enforcement. I think we have an open microphone. Lack of implementation.
I'm managing. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes,
I'm managing. Yeah. Please
okay,
go
thank
ahead.
you. So we have a lack of implementation and enforcement. What I mean here, connected clearly with the production of laws and, of course, international laws and international judgment, international justice, as was mentioned in the previous slides. Notorious shortcomings, flaws in the application of effective mechanisms to enforce their decisions. Not obligatory decisions, not enforceable decisions, which is a weakened, clearly, it's a weak, their capacity, they weakens their capacity to address the global challenges, the cyber crime, the pollution, the war, the hybrid wars, right violations, current conflicts. Not enough, let's say that way. Unequal influence in terms of actors. Again, as I was mentioning, the influence, the capacity is also connected to the lack of democracy. International organizations were created as common forums for countries and ended up being an extension of the classic model in terms of international subjects or actors. Some that we already mentioned, the multi-stakeholder, the multi-actor reality, much important because they are not very adapted to that. They're trying, but not enough and not at the need speed. The dependence and financial problems, of course, essential to any organization, the presumed autonomy and dissociation of the international organization from the control of a particular nation is relativized when funding depends on the states, on the members. And remember, according the wealthy or the economic capacity of each state, they pay differently. So in terms of financial representation, tend to be quite an impact, especially in the efficiency and also in the achievement of the objective, because the countries that have more gravitation, more economical power, tend to impact on the decisions. Approach and biases. Most of the international organizations of the world have the tendency to observe, to filter the world in a Western approach. That's a problem. Northwestern, to be more precise, which means that their universality, unique version, globalized concept is biased, is therefore unable to recognize the realities that lie outside this focus, is unable to adapt their initiatives to each context. That's very important. The exclusion of perspective and cultures has tried to be nuanced, but it remains a very complex problem, a very important criticism in the difficulties of implementation world initiatives. So again, we were questioning the initiatives, but being unable to be adjust, to be adapt to the context reality is clearly a technical and essential problem. The lack of adaptability to emerging challenges, the global challenges, the global situations requires a very, very important and very rapid response and counter measures, but tend to be not very flexible. Bureaucratic structures, institutions are not very flexible, so they have not adaptive situation with face the emerging problems. Global challenges move faster than the international organizations. That's a reality, and shows the tendency that to be rigid and less efficient with the changing speed of these challenges. So global governance tend to be the main area to deal with the global challenges, and they always let's say they're always beyond, they always at the back. So it's very hard to cover and to have countermeasures, okay, to incorporate, to have enough policies and mechanisms to deal with the global challenges. According to all of that, and just to think, problematize, questioning, criticism, of course, this is not a, oh, yes, no question. It's very complex. It's just to think, okay? These challenges and criticism can clearly be extended to many of the world international organizations. So I have some questions, but no need to be answered. It's just to think, okay? When we end the class, we can think, we can read. I'm going to give you, of course, bibliography to go deeper. It's a huge topic. We are going to continue in further classes with international organization and especially the UN system. And it's important, for example, to question, how can we view the UN as a guarantor of international peace and security when it includes a system of permanent members with veto power in the Security Council? A problem in terms of democracy and representation. How we can understand that the progress of integration processes goes hand in hand by the supranationality of the European Union when we have the example of Brexit. Okay, we have a division, we have a questioning in the supranationality process. Okay, maybe we can consider the intergovernmental, but again, considering what we already mentioned, it's important to question that. It's not a bad questioning. It's not, okay, this is not good. Okay, it's not enough. What we can consider, what we can think, propose to make it better, okay? That's very important, more constructive, more positive criticism. How can we really conceive the economic cooperation and development if we see inequality, bias, dysregulation, lack of transparency, and the operationalization of the current geopolitics of certain countries over others, taking for example, the OECD, which is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe, or even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, as an examples. So considering all that, I know it's a lot of information, but it's important to think about it. Are important topics in our regions, in the world, considering to analyze the different news, international news, the international important events. Of course, I give you some of bibliography. You can go deeper. Bella Walden, Stiglitz, very good covering this topic. And of course, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much once again for your excellent presentation.
Thank
The
you.
lecture are really amazing lecture, and I'm proud
Thank
of you
you.
because this you see you bring the burning agenda. This is very interesting topic. I'm enjoying while
It's
you
demanding topic
while you
to
just
think
yeah
all of us.
I'm enjoying what you presenting really very.
Thank you very much, Clary.
And now it is a time to have any suggestion or questions. Please, everybody,
Okay.
every AIU family who have any questions and comments can bring here. Our professor is ready to answer the questions. Professor Gonzalo, amazing person, amazing professor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So anybody who have any question, please bring your questions so that we can discuss on it. Before the students start asking the question, I wanna ask one question. It's
We have
very
a question from
yes. I have one.
David in the chat. He mentions that the situation of international organizations are actually implementing developed countries programs that match their interest in developing countries, where they increase pressure on these countries to adopt their agenda. Indeed, they sometimes is quite complex. The connection of interinstitutional, intergovernmental connection or agreements that is part of pressure. Okay, some international organizations development programs tend to be part of another of the economic or the common areas, another agenda. Okay, mainly developed by the developed countries. Okay, so yes, that it's very hard to connect in a good aspect, because clearly the developing programs are essential and very important for the developing countries. But on the other side, has a big cost when is biased or conditioned. We notice in the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund structured programs. So according to that, the decision making to open and to redefine the international organization may clearly reconnect the concept of representation. If everyone can be a participant, is able to be here, to be listening in the decision-making processes, is very important. So we need to consider what we call this participation of civil society. Okay, so the international organization tend to be created and run by the states, by the nations, the countries. But nowadays we have a new format, a new world international organization of stakeholders. So maybe according to that, we need to think of reconfigure, reset the scenario with all the actors, NGOs, international organizations, states, persons, civil society, and of course also the multinational and enterprises in general. Of course,
Thank you
Akande
so
has a
much.
good comment about the difficulties with the big gravitation forums, okay? Countries with very important gravitation and influence over the world, like G5, G7, G20, tend to be an example of this discoordination between foreign policies, own interests, national interests, and on the other side, the global governance, the cooperation, the coordination to help the world or to have a better world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gonzalo,
Thank you.
for excellent explanation. We have
Thank you
also
very
another question is in chat section. Before that, I gonna give it to Sis, this Jules. Yeah, please unmute your microphone and start your question. Welcome, Sis.
Thank you for the great presentation. I have just 3 questions and very relevant for me in international institution. The first is, what about the international organization cluster? For example, UNICEF, UNOPS, WHO, WFP, because I have been working as IT in one of the cluster
Yes.
organization in Africa. And I saw some how they call some problems to overcome together with this cluster. And what can you give advice in terms of clusters of international
Yes,
organization?
the specialized entities or specialized organization of the UN system. First of all, not all of them are exactly the same in terms of law. UNICEF is a fund, UNOPS is an organization, is an agency, WHO, WAC. Well, we have a lot of situation. We are going to cover that in further classes for sure. But despite the good aspect, okay, this is important. The existence were important for a lot of regions, essentially the developing regions, but it's not enough. Again, it's not showing effective change, and it's not promoting a correct consecration of the needs of the regional context. So considering that, to open the international organization and to reconsider, redimension, reconfigure should be essential, should be, I mean, it's like a sort of a need, especially considering after this class, we have a lot of criticism questioning over this, to discuss how to adapt, adjust, and be able to have a more efficient international organization model. And of course, those are example of that is essential. So to be all, for example, the region of Africa, the region of South America, the region of Asia, to be more efficiently represented, more efficiently part of the taking decision, not just the countries, even the social society, not just the government, all the areas of the country, all the groups, the population groups. That's essential. Okay, the community itself is an international community, so it's all of it, not just the governments. Yes.
And now the second is fundraising in international organization to overcome above crisis situation.
Yes.
Sometimes are not entirely used for the mirror.
Yes.
How comes this?
Such a topic, this very hard, as always, because the economy and the financial aspect is a string. It's very hard to deal with. Well, we have some different situations. It's not the same the fundraising of UNICEF than the fundraising of UNOPS or the UNESCO or others. So maybe we can make a share approach, okay, and to consider different versions of those, and of course to be able to adapt to the nowadays. Some of the aspects of the dependency of the international organization the with the classical representation, the dependency with the financial aspect of the countries, it's a flaw, it's a weak aspect that actually reduce or question the autonomy, the capacity of own decisions of the or international organizations. So fundraising could be reconfigured, redone in terms of thinking. Of course, that's also in you. I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the solutions. Okay, that's important to consider. Okay,
Okay,
but
the
it's
last,
important to think.
yeah.
Firstly, we question the situation. Very good. Thank you, Sid.
Okay, the last question is very relevant.
Oh, okay.
The last is the United Nations Department of Safety and Security, UNDSS, and the United Nations Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, and the World Food Program and the World Health Organization and so on. Among other relevant UN department, we know we have other relevant department in UN system, aim to intervene firstly in case of crisis. It's like front lines organization. They are the first to come to intervene, but it seems lack of strong coordination between those first frontline department with delayed
Yes.
action, causing broad of consequences to target
Yes.
communities in a challenge situation like Gaza, Palestine,
Yes.
Ukraine. That is just an example for a case.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
What strategy can be taken to stronger coordination and act on time during crisis?
Well, one of some authors consider some scholars consider that in that case is a disconnection, is a wrong effective connection in terms of interagency work. So a lot of this, again, the double agenda, but inside of an international organization, we have some organizations that had goals, objectives, purposes, and on the other side has decision making by the states or by the countries. That's this connection between the goals and the specific intention in specific interest by the decision makers, the stakeholders, tend to disconnect even the interagency. All of them are part of the United Nations system. So all of them are under the letter, the humanitarian letter, are under the main principle of international law. But despite that, they don't work coordinated, they don't join the forces, the capacities, the approaches. So that creates consequences. So be able to re-question, redone these kind of mechanics is essential. The dynamics of not having that double agenda, not having that distortion, disconnection between one and the other, that's very important. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you, Sis,
Hilary.
for your questions. Really, I appreciate your participation.
Okay.
And then we have
Thank you,
one
everybody.
question with Shock. Unmute your microphone and just start question.
Oh, hi everyone. I just wanna say the international organization opens up doors for international business and to know new horizons about other countries. Like, for example, if you wanna know about Croatia, for example. like what about this country or the tourism. So I think it opens a door for every aspect in other country. That's
Well, I mean,
a way.
I mean, as I was mentioning, it's important to consider that clearly the world continues, the time changes, the era is changing, the demanding is changing. So according to that, it's very essential to consider that international organization would be very efficient or quite good or some essential in some processes but that's from another moment. Right now, nowadays, the state of the art of the question is developing not enough, not sufficient, not not accurate to the needs. So according to that, we need to think that yes, in some cases it was very, very useful and or quite good for some crisis. Even Cis was mentioning, but nowadays we need to reconsider the topic. Okay, we need to think, all of you, all of us, we need to think and to propose some maybe some changes, maybe some new model, I don't know, is up to any of us to innovate in terms of the demands of global challenges, the speed, the flaws or the shortcomings or the problems that are a structure, are part of the system of this model. So according to that, we need to consider these perspectives